Imagine stumbling upon a tiny, vulnerable puppy, battered not by human cruelty but by the relentless forces of nature. Barnacles cling to its fur, and parasites inflict hidden wounds. What could possibly happen next to transform despair into an unimaginable miracle? Stay with us as we reveal a story of resilience and unexpected transformation that will leave you utterly shocked. On a misty morning along a rugged coastline, a small puppy was discovered near a rocky tide pool. Its body bore injuries caused by barnacles and parasites. The harsh ocean environment had taken its toll on the innocent creature, leaving it weak and vulnerable, stranded between crashing waves and treacherous rocks. The puppy's plight was a heartbreaking testament to nature's unforgiving side. Local marine biologists and animal rescuers soon converged on the scene. They determined that the puppy had been exposed to a particularly aggressive outbreak. Barnacles had attached themselves to its fur and skin, while parasites fed on its weakened state. The injuries were severe, and the initial prognosis was grim. Yet, in that desperate moment, something unexpected began to unfold. As experts worked feverishly to stabilize the little animal, they noticed signs that defied all expectations: a spark of resilience in its eyes and an almost imperceptible, determined wag of its tail. Amid the chaos of the rescue, Dr. Emily Carter, a seasoned veterinarian with a passion for marine life and animal welfare, led the charge. "It's as if this puppy has an inner strength we can't quite explain," she murmured, carefully examining the wounds. With innovative treatments and unwavering commitment, Dr. Carter and her team initiated a series of emergency procedures. Their mission was not only to save the puppy's life but also to uncover the mystery behind its seemingly miraculous survival against nature's brutal assault. As word of the puppy's ordeal spread, the local community was gripped by a mixture of horror and hope. Social media buzzed with images and updates, and soon the story reached far beyond the coastline. What had initially appeared to be a tragic encounter with nature was now evolving into something extraordinary, an unexpected tale of survival and transformation that captivated everyone who followed its journey. In the hours following the initial rescue, Dr. Emily Carter and her dedicated team worked tirelessly in a makeshift veterinary unit set up near the rocky tide pools. The puppy, shivering and battered, was gently wrapped in warm blankets and placed on a portable examination table. Every minute was critical as the combined effects of barnacle injuries and parasitic infestations threatened the fragile life of the little animal. Dr. Carter, with steady hands and compassionate eyes, led the diagnostic process. She carefully inspected the puppy's wounds, noting that clusters of barnacles had attached themselves not only to its fur but had also begun to damage the delicate skin beneath. Parasites, likely thriving in the damp environment, were found around the wound margins, adding to the risk of severe infection. "We're facing an aggressive dual assault here," she explained to her team, her voice calm but urgent. "We need to act quickly to remove the barnacles, treat the parasitic infection, and stabilize its condition." As the veterinary team set to work, they employed a combination of gentle mechanical removal and careful chemical treatments designed for the delicate skin of a small animal. The process was painstaking. Each barnacle had to be detached without causing further trauma, and every trace of parasitic infestation had to be addressed with precision. During the procedure, Dr. Carter continuously monitored the puppy's vital signs, her mind focused on the challenge ahead. Outside the rescue site, news of the puppy's dire condition began to spread. Locals familiar with the rugged coastline, as well as concerned animal lovers from nearby communities, started to gather near the rescue area. Some onlookers watched with bated breath as the veterinary team worked, while others took to social media, posting updates and rallying support for the small creature's recovery. The story quickly captured public attention. What initially appeared to be a tragic encounter with nature was evolving into a narrative of hope and resilience. Amid the bustle, a local marine biologist, Dr. Mark Thompson, arrived at the scene. Dr. Thompson was an expert on coastal ecosystems and had spent years studying the impact of marine organisms on terrestrial wildlife. He observed the conditions that had led to the puppy's injuries, the dense concentration of barnacles on nearby rocks and the unusual proliferation of parasites, likely linked to recent changes in tidal patterns. "These are not common occurrences in this area," he remarked to a journalist on site. "It appears that environmental conditions have shifted, creating a perfect storm of factors that endangered this animal." His insights added a scientific layer to the unfolding story, bridging the gap between a medical rescue and broader ecological changes. Back at the rescue unit, as the veterinary procedures continued, the atmosphere grew charged with anticipation. The puppy, though visibly in pain, showed signs of quiet resilience. Its eyes, though heavy, flickered with a determined glimmer. Dr. Carter noted this with a hopeful smile. "There's something remarkable about this little one," she confided to her assistant. Even in its suffering, there's an undeniable spark of life. It's as if it's fighting with every ounce of its being to survive. These words resonated with the team, fueling their resolve to give the puppy every chance at recovery. During a brief lull in the procedure, one of the younger technicians, Lisa, carefully recorded every detail in a log. She documented the number and location of barnacles removed, the concentration of the chemical treatment applied, and the puppy's responses at each step. Her meticulous notes were intended not only for the current case but also to serve as a valuable reference for future rescues in similar circumstances. The collaboration between veterinary professionals and environmental scientists like Dr. Thompson underscored the multidisciplinary effort required to tackle such a complex situation. As the emergency treatments continued, tension mingled with cautious optimism. The initial prognosis had been grim, but gradually, signs of improvement began to emerge. The puppy's heart rate stabilized, and its eyes, once dull with pain, started to brighten ever so slightly after each treatment session. Encouraged by these small victories, Dr. Carter adjusted the treatment plan to focus on boosting the animal's overall strength through specialized nutrition and gentle physiotherapy. In a quiet moment away from the controlled chaos of the rescue, Dr. Carter stepped outside the mobile unit for a breath of fresh sea air. Standing on the rocky shore, she gazed out at the tumultuous waves and the rugged coastline, a stark reminder of the forces that had almost claimed this vulnerable life. Nature can be merciless, she thought, but sometimes, in the heart of devastation, there's room for miracles. Determined, she returned to her team with renewed energy, ready to do everything possible to turn the tide in the puppy's favor. As night began to fall again, the rescue team prepared to move the puppy to a safer, more controlled environment for continued recovery. With every step, they remained vigilant, knowing that the battle against the physical and environmental scars was far from over. Yet, amid the challenges, there was a growing sense of anticipation, a belief that the puppy's journey from injury to potential recovery would soon reveal outcomes that no one could have predicted. In the hours and days following the emergency treatment, the rescue scene at the rocky coastline grew into a flurry of activity and new challenges. While Dr. Emily Carter and her team continued to monitor the puppy's recovery, a series of conflicts and interactions began to emerge, hinting at deeper complications that would shape the course of the story. News of the puppy's dramatic condition and the subsequent rescue spread rapidly through local media and social networks. As updates posted online garnered thousands of views, concerned citizens began to weigh in with theories and demands for answers. Some viewers questioned how environmental factors had led to such an unusual outbreak of barnacles and parasites, while others expressed admiration for the dedicated rescue team. Social media debates ignited heated discussions about climate change, coastal pollution, and the health of marine ecosystems. Local environmental activist groups took notice and started organizing protests, demanding stricter controls on coastal industries. These groups argued that the harsh environmental conditions contributing to the puppy's injuries were symptomatic of larger ecological issues that required urgent attention. Meanwhile, at the rescue unit, Dr. Carter was forced to confront internal challenges. Although her primary focus remained on saving the puppy, logistical issues soon emerged. The delicate chemical treatments needed to remove the barnacles were in limited supply, and some of the specialized medications were running low due to unexpected demand. Hospital administrators grew increasingly concerned about resource allocation, fearing that an overemphasis on this high-profile case might divert funds from other critical emergencies. In a tense meeting with hospital management, Dr. Carter defended the importance of this rescue, not only as a compassionate act but as a wake-up call about broader environmental hazards. Saving this puppy is not just about one animal, it's about drawing attention to the dangerous conditions affecting our coastlines and wildlife, she argued passionately. Her words, though well received by some, also sparked friction with cost-conscious administrators who questioned the allocation of limited resources. Outside the hospital, the puppy's condition continued to draw attention from both local authorities and scientific experts. Dr. Mark Thompson, the marine biologist who had earlier examined the tide pools and barnacle clusters, now took a more active role, collaborating with environmental agencies. Dr. Thompson began collecting water and sediment samples from the area, hoping to determine whether a recent chemical spill or other industrial accident had contributed to an abnormal growth of parasites and barnacles. His research meetings, held at the local university, attracted both academic interest and community concern. "There's something off here," he stated in one interview. "The density of barnacles and parasites is not typical for this stretch of coastline. We must consider that human activity might have disrupted the natural balance." Amid these external pressures, a new personal conflict began to affect Dr. Carter. While tending to the puppy's fragile state, she started receiving anonymous emails from a group calling themselves the Coastal Guardians. The emails contained both supportive messages and ominous warnings that questioned whether the rescue was being used to distract from a larger, concealed industrial cover-up. One email read, "The injuries you see are just the beginning. Look deeper into the water, and you'll find evidence that our shores are being poisoned for profit." These messages unsettled Dr. Carter and her team, as they introduced the possibility that the environmental crisis was not merely a natural anomaly but might be linked to deliberate human interference. As tension mounted, the community's response became even more divided. Some local residents, outraged by the perceived negligence of coastal industries, began to organize public forums and beach cleanup events, demanding government accountability. At one such forum, heated debates broke out between longtime fishermen and representatives of industrial companies. The fishermen claimed that the deteriorating coastal conditions had cost them livelihoods and endangered marine life, while the industrial representatives argued that stringent regulations would jeopardize economic stability. The clash of these interests added another layer of conflict, forcing community leaders to mediate between environmental concerns and economic realities. Back at the rescue unit, the puppy, now showing subtle signs of recovery, was moved to a dedicated veterinary facility for long-term care. Dr. Carter closely monitored its progress, documenting every improvement. In Bailey's honor, she published a comprehensive case study. However, even as the puppy's heart rate stabilized and its eyes began to brighten, there remained an undercurrent of uncertainty. The treatment protocol, once heralded as innovative, now faced scrutiny from peers who questioned whether the environmental factors could lead to recurring outbreaks if not addressed at the source. Officer Rivera, who had initially discovered the injured puppy, continued his patrols with a renewed sense of purpose. His nightly visits to the area were now accompanied by quiet observations of unusual activities, shadowy figures near the tide pools, unmarked trucks parked along the beach at odd hours, and whispered conversations among local vendors about strange occurrences at the water's edge. These observations deepened his suspicion that there was more to the story than a mere natural disaster, and he resolved to work closely with Dr. Thompson and environmental authorities to uncover any potential links to industrial malfeasance. In the midst of all these developments, the local media, led by an increasingly investigative Olivia Reed, began to piece together the various narratives into a sprawling, interconnected saga. Blog posts enriched with interviews from community members, scientists, and hospital staff portrayed a picture of a community on the brink of both ecological and social upheaval. Her writing captured the complexity of the situation. A tiny puppy injured by the natural elements had become the unlikely catalyst for a broader investigation into environmental negligence and corporate malfeasance. As night fell again over the rugged coastline, Dr. Carter, Officer Rivera, and Dr. Thompson gathered for an impromptu meeting to review their findings. With piles of data, photographs, and witness statements spread out on a weathered table, they discussed the next steps. "We have to follow every lead, no matter how small," Dr. Thompson urged. "If we can establish a clear connection between these environmental changes and human activity, we might not only save this puppy but prevent further harm to our entire ecosystem." Their collective determination resonated in the room, setting the stage for the next phase of the investigation, one that promised to shake the foundations of both the local industry and community governance. Just as Dr. Emily Carter's team was making steady progress in stabilizing the injured puppy, a shocking twist emerged that would upend everything they had assumed about the case. One crisp morning, while re-evaluating the rescue site along the rugged coastline, Dr. Carter noticed something peculiar on a tide pool rock that had been partially obscured by seaweed and driftwood. Embedded in the rough surface was a small, corroded metal capsule bearing a faded company logo, a logo that, after a brief search, was identified as belonging to one of the region's largest chemical manufacturers. Intrigued and alarmed, Dr. Carter carefully retrieved the capsule. With the help of a local materials expert, she discovered that it contained a series of sealed documents and a sample of a chemical residue not normally found in natural coastal environments. The documents revealed that a recent accidental spill had occurred at a nearby industrial facility, an incident that had been quietly covered up by the company. Even more startling was the chemical analysis. The residue showed properties that could accelerate the growth of marine organisms, including barnacles and parasitic species, far beyond their normal rates. Dr. Carter's mind raced with the implications. The aggressive colonization of barnacles on the puppy and the unusual surge in parasites, initially attributed solely to the harsh conditions of the coastline, now appeared to have an unnatural catalyst. The chemical spill, it seemed, had created a toxic cocktail in the water that disrupted the local ecosystem. This spill had allowed barnacles to proliferate at an alarming rate and had increased the parasite load in the surrounding environment, directly contributing to the severe injuries seen on the puppy. Realizing that this revelation had far-reaching implications, Dr. Carter immediately convened an emergency meeting with her team, including marine biologist Dr. Mark Thompson and local environmental expert Ms. Laura Jensen. "This isn't just a case of nature doing its worst," Dr. Carter explained, her voice trembling with urgency. "It appears that a chemical spill is fueling an environmental disaster, one that not only endangered this puppy but could be affecting all coastal wildlife." Dr. Thompson confirmed that the levels of pollutants found in the residue were indeed abnormal for the area, suggesting deliberate contamination rather than a natural phenomenon. As the news spread within the rescue unit, tension mounted. The initial assumption that the puppy's injuries were a tragic accident of nature was now shattered by evidence of industrial negligence. The team realized that the spill's impact might be far more widespread than they had feared. Local authorities, previously unaware of any incident, were now forced to launch a full-scale environmental investigation. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, community outrage began to build as the cover-up was exposed. The twist deepened further when Dr. Jensen revealed that the chemical in question was known to have unpredictable effects on living organisms. Laboratory studies had shown that even concentrations of the substance could compromise immune systems, making animals more susceptible to parasitic infestations and opportunistic infections. In the case of the puppy, the weakened condition likely made it an easy target for aggressive barnacle colonization, while the altered water chemistry provided a perfect breeding ground for harmful parasites. Amid the unfolding drama, a local whistleblower, a former employee of the chemical manufacturer, stepped forward with damning testimony. In an exclusive interview with Olivia Reed, the investigative journalist covering the story, the whistleblower detailed how management had intentionally minimized the spill's impact and concealed its aftermath to protect corporate interests. They knew that releasing this information would mean huge fines and possibly shutting down operations, the whistleblower said in a hushed tone. So they swept it under the rug, hoping that nature would take care of it. But nature didn't, it only made things worse. This revelation added a critical new dimension to the case. Not only was the puppy's suffering exacerbated by an industrial accident, but the subsequent cover-up had allowed the environmental damage to persist unchecked. The community, already reeling from the emotional impact of the rescue, now faced the harsh reality of corporate malfeasance affecting their local ecosystem. The twist forced Dr. Carter and her colleagues to expand their mission. No longer was it solely about treating a battered animal, it had become a fight for environmental justice. They began collaborating with local environmental groups and regulatory agencies, pooling their findings to demand accountability from the chemical manufacturer. Press conferences were scheduled, and detailed reports were drafted to highlight how the spill had created a cascade of ecological disasters, endangering not just one puppy but potentially an entire community of wildlife. In that pivotal moment, as the team pieced together the chain of events, from the clandestine spill to its devastating biological effects, the rescue of the injured puppy transformed into a symbol of a much larger battle. The puppy's frail yet resilient eyes became a silent testimony to the hidden costs of corporate negligence and environmental abuse. Dr. Carter, looking into those eyes, realized that this case had the power to spark significant change, to force industries to adopt safer practices and to protect fragile coastal ecosystems from further harm. With the damning evidence now in hand and the public's attention squarely focused on the incident, the stage was set for a dramatic confrontation between environmental advocates and the chemical manufacturer. What had started as a heartbreaking rescue was evolving into a fight for justice, a fight that promised to change the landscape of environmental policy and bring about much-needed reforms. The revelation of the chemical spill and its role in accelerating the infestation of barnacles and parasites on the injured puppy sent shockwaves through everyone involved. In the wake of this startling twist, the rescue team, local authorities, and community members had to come to terms with the harsh reality that nature's cruelty had been magnified by human negligence. Emotions ran high as each person grappled with the implications and adjusted their course of action. Dr. Emily Carter was the first to internalize the impact of the discovery. After reviewing the documents and residue samples, her initial shock gradually gave way to a steely resolve. In a quiet moment in her temporary mobile lab, she confided to her assistant, "This isn't just a case of a puppy caught in nature's crossfire. It's a clear message that human activity, this spill, has tipped the balance. We must do more than just treat these wounds, we need to expose what's behind them." Her words set the tone for the team, sparking long, intense discussions on how to redirect their focus from an isolated rescue to a broader environmental inquiry. Dr. Carter began preparing detailed reports not only on the puppy's condition but also on the unusual chemical markers and their probable source, determined to ensure that her work would have implications far beyond saving one life. Meanwhile, at the rescue unit, tensions were high among the veterinary staff. Some were initially frustrated by the extra workload and the unexpected twist that transformed their routine rescue into a potential environmental scandal. However, as discussions unfolded, many began to see the situation as an opportunity to drive systemic change. "We're on the front line, not just for this one puppy," explained one of the senior technicians, her voice resolute despite lingering fatigue. "Our findings might prevent more animals, and even people, from suffering similar fates." Over several late-night strategy sessions, the team reallocated resources and updated treatment protocols to account for the chemical's long-term effects. They plan to work with environmental scientists to monitor the area and assess ongoing risks, understanding that their adjustments might help avert a future crisis. Local marine biologist Dr. Mark Thompson, whose expertise had already lent critical insight into the unusual barnacle growth, was deeply affected by the revelation. At a hastily arranged press briefing with community environmental groups, he spoke with a mix of professional concern and personal sorrow. "I've dedicated my career to understanding natural ecosystems," he said, his tone heavy with emotion, "and to see an industrial spill so dramatically alter the delicate balance here is heartbreaking. But this is also a call to action. If we can prove the connection, we must hold those responsible accountable." Dr. Thompson immediately began coordinating with regulatory agencies and local environmental watchdogs, determined to secure additional testing of water samples and sediment from the affected area. His proactive stance helped galvanize public opinion and lend scientific credibility to the growing demands for accountability. Officer Daniel Rivera, already emotionally invested since his tearful discovery of the puppy's plight, now found his responsibilities expanding. In the precinct, Rivera's colleagues expressed mixed emotions. Some admired his compassion and unwavering pursuit of justice, while others cautioned that diving into environmental matters might stretch their resources thin. During a late-night debriefing, Rivera addressed these concerns, stating, "I know this isn't what we expected when we started this case, but the truth is bigger than one incident. Protecting our community means looking at all the factors that threaten it, even if it's not strictly about crime." His willingness to embrace this broader perspective helped shift the department's mindset, as more officers began to see the interconnectedness of environmental health and public safety. The local community, too, was visibly shaken by the news. Social media platforms buzzed with a mix of outrage and hope. Many residents, especially those living along the rugged coastline, recounted their own experiences of environmental degradation and its impact on local wildlife. A heartfelt post from a longtime resident read, "I've watched our shores change over the years. Now, this incident is proof that corporate neglect is hurting us all." Community leaders quickly organized public forums and town hall meetings to address these issues. At one such meeting, held at the community center, Mrs. Charlotte Green rallied citizens by declaring, "We must stand together and demand that our environment and the lives it sustains are protected. This puppy's suffering is a symptom of a larger problem, and we will not be silent." The outpouring of public support spurred local government officials to promise investigations into the spill and to re-examine safety regulations for industrial activities along the coast. At the animal shelter, volunteer Carla Martinez struggled with her own emotional conflict. She had always been devoted to caring for injured animals, but now the case hit close to home. Seeing this little one in pain because of human error makes it personal. Carla committed to a group of fellow volunteers during a late-night meeting. Motivated by both compassion and a desire for justice, she initiated an awareness campaign at the shelter. Flyers were distributed detailing not only the puppy's story but also urging community members to join efforts in environmental cleanup and to support stricter industrial oversight. Carla's initiative quickly drew a crowd, as many were inspired by the tangible call for change. In the midst of all these reactions, the injured puppy, nicknamed Bailey by the rescue team, remained a silent but potent symbol of resilience. As the treatment progressed, subtle improvements in its condition became a beacon of optimism for everyone involved. Each small victory, be it a decrease in parasite load or the successful removal of a particularly stubborn barnacle cluster, reinforced the belief that with the right combination of care and collective action, even the gravest of wounds could begin to heal. In this complex web of reaction and adjustment, the community, the rescue team, and the local authorities all found themselves re-evaluating their roles. The case had transcended its initial bounds, evolving from a simple rescue into a catalyst for environmental and social change. Amid the uncertainty and the challenges, one thing was clear: The ripple effects of this tragedy were sparking conversations and mobilizing efforts that might finally turn the tide on corporate negligence and environmental degradation. As the rescue team and environmental experts worked to stabilize the injured puppy and unravel the mystery behind the chemical spill, new subplots began to emerge that complicated the situation and broadened its implications. What initially seemed to be a straightforward case of environmental misfortune was quickly revealed to be a nexus of interconnected challenges, ranging from corporate cover-ups to community activism and internal departmental tensions. One of the first unexpected developments came from the local environmental watchdog group, the Coastal Integrity Coalition, CIC. Members of CIC, already outraged by the potential cover-up of the chemical spill, began conducting their own independent tests on water and sediment samples taken from the shoreline. Their preliminary findings suggested that not only had the chemical spill accelerated the proliferation of barnacles and parasites, but it might have also triggered a cascade of ecological disturbances in the entire coastal region. This revelation sent shockwaves through the community and intensified the demands for corporate accountability. CIC leaders organized a press conference to share their data, urging local government officials to launch a full investigation into industrial activities along the coast. Simultaneously, whispers of a deliberate cover-up began to circulate within the community. Several local fishermen reported noticing unusual patterns along the shoreline, areas where the water appeared discolored and where dead marine life had washed ashore in alarming numbers. These observations, once dismissed as natural fluctuations, were now being reinterpreted in light of the chemical evidence. A well-respected veteran fisherman even claimed that he had been warned by a retired employee of the chemical manufacturer about hidden spills that were routinely swept under the rug. His account added fuel to the fire, suggesting that the current incident might be just one piece of a much larger pattern of environmental negligence. Within the hospital, internal pressures also mounted. Dr. Emily Carter's passionate advocacy for the puppy's case was starting to clash with budgetary constraints and administrative priorities. Hospital administrators, facing scrutiny over resource allocation, argued that the funds and attention directed toward this high-profile rescue might detract from other critical areas of patient care. A tense meeting was held between Dr. Carter and hospital management, during which she defended the broader significance of the case. "This isn't just about saving one animal," she insisted. "It's about exposing a dangerous trend that could affect countless lives, both human and animal. Ignoring this could mean we're complicit in allowing corporate malfeasance to continue unchecked." Although some administrators remained skeptical, her impassioned plea forced them to consider the long-term repercussions of inaction, adding another layer of complexity. A local investigative journalist, Olivia Reed, intensified her coverage of the story. Olivia began receiving anonymous tips not only about the chemical spill but also about potential conflicts of interest involving local officials and the chemical manufacturer. One tip, in particular, included a series of emails that hinted at secret meetings between high-ranking government representatives and executives from the manufacturing company. The leaked communications suggested that financial incentives might have been used to silence environmental complaints. Olivia's reporting became a rallying point for community activists and further polarized public opinion, with some demanding immediate regulatory action while others cautioned against a rush to judgment without incontrovertible proof. Amid these external pressures, internal departmental conflicts within the local police also emerged. Officer Daniel Rivera, who had already been deeply affected by the puppy's plight, now found his unit divided over the scope of the investigation. Some senior officers, uneasy about the expanding focus on environmental and corporate issues, urged Rivera to stick strictly to traditional law enforcement roles. "We're here to enforce the law, not to get embroiled in industrial disputes," one officer argued during a tense briefing. Meanwhile, a younger contingent within the department, inspired by Rivera's heartfelt commitment, began advocating for a more holistic approach to public safety, one that recognized the inextricable link between environmental health and community well-being. This internal schism threatened to disrupt operational cohesion, forcing Rivera to navigate the delicate balance between personal conviction and departmental loyalty. On a more personal level, volunteer Carla Martinez at the local animal shelter, who had become increasingly invested in the puppy's recovery, faced her own challenges. Carla had always been the voice of compassion at the shelter, but now she was also confronting the daunting reality that the environmental crisis could have long-term repercussions for all stray animals along the coast. Determined to make a difference, Carla initiated an awareness campaign at the shelter. She organized educational workshops for local residents, distributed flyers that explained the connection between industrial pollution and animal health, and even spearheaded a fundraiser to support further veterinary care and environmental testing. Her grassroots efforts began to galvanize community support, though they also attracted criticism from some who felt the shelter should remain solely focused on animal rescue rather than environmental activism. All these emerging subplots, corporate cover-ups, environmental activism, internal police discord, and grassroots community initiatives, began to converge, creating a multifaceted web of challenges that underscored the far-reaching impact of the puppy ordeal. The injured animal had become an unlikely symbol not just of personal resilience but of a broader struggle for environmental justice and transparency. As dusk fell over the rugged coastline, each group, whether they were regulators, law enforcement, hospital staff, or local residents, recognized that the stakes were much higher than saving one life. The collective efforts to uncover the truth and hold the responsible parties accountable had now become a defining battle for the future of the entire region. In this swirling vortex of revelations and challenges, the puppy, slowly recovering and quietly resilient, remained at the heart of the story. Its battle against barnacles and parasites was now inseparably linked to a larger fight against environmental degradation and corporate neglect. As each new piece of evidence emerged and every conflicting voice was heard, the community braced itself for the coming storm, a storm that promised to upend long-standing power structures and redefine what it meant to protect both nature and the vulnerable lives it sustained. As the investigation deepened and the ripple effects of the chemical spill reached far beyond the injured puppy's immediate care, a series of complex interactions and emotional dilemmas began to surface among everyone involved. These were not merely technical challenges to be solved, they were personal crises that forced each character to re-examine their values and responsibilities in the face of overwhelming environmental and institutional neglect. Dr. Emily Carter, still at the forefront of the rescue, found herself increasingly torn between her clinical duty and her growing role as an environmental advocate. Late one evening, after a particularly grueling treatment session, she sat alone in the quiet of the mobile lab, her eyes fixed on the delicate monitoring screen displaying the puppy's slowly stabilizing heart rate. In that reflective moment, she confided in her journal, "I entered this profession to save lives, but now I must confront the fact that the very environment we live in can destroy life if left unchecked. How can I continue to heal when our system is rigged to harm?" The conflict in her words echoed the inner turmoil that many of her colleagues began to express as well. At the same time, tension simmered within the local animal shelter, where volunteer Carla Martinez had taken a leading role in the grassroots awareness campaign. Carla, known for her unwavering compassion, now struggled with the weight of responsibility. On one hand, she felt a profound duty to care for every injured animal. On the other, she was painfully aware that the environmental crisis threatened to overwhelm the shelter's limited resources. During a late-night meeting with other shelter volunteers, Carla admitted, "Every time I see Bailey's condition improve, I feel hopeful. But when I think about the hundreds of strays that might be suffering in silence because of this pollution, I wonder, are we fighting a losing battle?" Her admission ignited a round of empathetic nods and shared stories of past rescues that had not been enough to counter the rising tide of environmental damage. The volunteers, though united in their mission, found themselves wrestling with feelings of inadequacy and deep sorrow over a seemingly insurmountable challenge. Within the precinct, Officer Daniel Rivera also grappled with his own internal conflict. Known for his tough exterior, Rivera had been visibly shaken by the series of events that had unfolded since he first discovered the injured puppy. In a quiet conversation with a trusted partner, he admitted, "I never thought a case like this would hit me so hard. Every night, when I pass by that oak tree and see Bailey resting there, I can't help but feel that we're all missing something, a larger truth about our environment and our duty to protect it." His partner, a younger officer with a sensitive nature, responded softly, "Maybe it's not just about enforcing the law. Maybe it's about standing up for the voiceless, whether they have fur or skin." This exchange highlighted the emotional dichotomy within the department, between the traditional duty-bound approach and a more holistic, empathetic understanding of public service. Elsewhere, community members, already stirred by the emerging environmental controversy, found themselves entangled in personal dilemmas as well. At a community forum organized by activist Ms. Charlotte Green, residents shared stories of personal loss intertwined with environmental degradation. One middle-aged man, his voice trembling with remembered pain, recalled, "My father was a fisherman. Over the years, I watched the sea change, fish disappearing, shores becoming barren, and I couldn't understand why. Now, seeing what happened to this puppy, I realized that our environment isn't just a backdrop, it's part of our very lives." His poignant reflection spurred others to share similar stories, leading to a collective catharsis. However, not everyone felt this renewed sense of unity. A small group of skeptics argued that focusing on environmental issues would only divert attention from more immediate concerns, such as economic stability and public safety. Their voices, though quieter, introduced an undercurrent of tension that threatened to fracture the emerging solidarity. Media coverage further complicated the emotional landscape. Olivia Reed's investigative reports, which had steadily uncovered connections between the chemical spill and corporate negligence, began to spark public debate. In her interviews, several local citizens expressed conflicting emotions: outrage over industrial malfeasance, sorrow for the animals affected, and a cautious hope that justice would finally be served. One tearful interview with an elderly resident revealed that her own long-held beliefs about nature's cruelty were now being reshaped by the possibility of human intervention and accountability. "I used to believe that nature was simply harsh," she said, her voice wavering. "But now I see that it's often our actions that make it so." Her words underscored a broader realization. The dilemmas were not isolated to the rescue team or the police, they resonated deeply with the community as a whole. Amid these layered interactions, every member of the network, be it Dr. Carter, Officer Rivera, shelter volunteer Carla, or community activist Ms. Green, began to understand that this case was about more than one injured puppy. It was about confronting the painful interplay between human neglect and environmental decay. Each emotional dilemma, every internal conflict, and all the personal stories shared at community meetings formed a complex mosaic of despair, hope, and the relentless desire for change. As the investigation continued and the injured puppy slowly showed signs of recovery, the collective realization set in that the battle for environmental justice was as much a fight for the soul of the community as it was a matter of animal rescue. The questions they all faced about responsibility, compassion, and the true cost of progress would soon drive the next phase of their quest for truth. As dusk fell over the rugged coastline once again, a palpable sense of foreboding began to envelop the rescue site. The earlier revelations, the chemical spill, the accelerated growth of barnacles, and the surge of parasites, had set the stage for a much larger mystery. In the days following the initial treatments, a series of strange, unexplained events and anonymous warnings began to surface, amplifying the tension and hinting at a deeper, more sinister connection behind the environmental disaster. One overcast evening, as Dr. Emily Carter was reviewing the latest laboratory results with her team, an urgent call came in from a local fisherman, Mr. Roberto Silva. Known for his intimate knowledge of the coastline, he reported that while out on his boat, he had witnessed an unmarked truck parked near a restricted industrial area, an area rumored to have been the site of previous chemical spills. "I saw the truck idling, lights off, and then it drove away just as quickly as it appeared," he recalled in a shaky voice. This eyewitness account, though brief, raised questions. Was this truck involved in the current spill, or was it connected to a pattern of covert activities along the shore? Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Rivera, whose initial discovery of the injured puppy had already stirred a wave of community concern, received a cryptic text message late one night. The message, sent from an unknown number, simply read, "Look beneath the surface. There's more here than meets the eye." Rivera's brow furrowed as he considered the implications. The message seemed to suggest that the chemical spill was not a one-off accident but rather part of a deliberate, ongoing cover-up orchestrated by powerful interests. This anonymous tip injected a fresh surge of determination into his investigation, prompting him to expand his patrol routes to include areas he had previously overlooked. At the local animal shelter, volunteer Carla Martinez began to notice a disturbing trend. In addition to the increasing number of strays exhibiting symptoms similar to Bailey's, there were reports of animals with inexplicable skin lesions and unusual growths, even among those rescued from inland areas. Carla received an email from a shelter worker in a neighboring town, warning that they had encountered several animals with signs of chemical burns and abnormal parasitic infections. The email, laced with urgency, ended with the stark message, "The spill might be spreading. We need answers before it's too late." These reports, when combined with the earlier laboratory findings, hinted at a broader environmental catastrophe that could affect not only coastal wildlife but also domestic pets and even human populations. Adding to the mounting tension, Olivia Reed, the tenacious investigative journalist, broke another major lead. In a series of interviews with a former employee of the chemical manufacturer responsible for the spill, Olivia uncovered startling allegations. The whistleblower, speaking under the condition of anonymity, claimed that the company had knowingly released chemicals that would disrupt local ecosystems, a tactic designed to downplay the risks by shifting the blame onto natural occurrences. They calculated that the increase in barnacles and parasites would seem like an environmental anomaly, the source confided. But in reality, it was a controlled release, a way to mask deeper violations of environmental regulations. This explosive information not only lent credibility to the suspicions already circulating but also raised the stakes significantly, as it implicated a major corporation in deliberate environmental harm. In the midst of these revelations, local community leaders convened an emergency meeting at the town hall. The meeting was packed with activists, concerned residents, and representatives from environmental watchdog groups. Heated debates ensued about the potential long-term impacts of the spill. "This isn't just about one injured puppy," argued a passionate environmental advocate. "It's about the health of our entire coastal community. If we ignore these warning signs, who knows how many lives, both animal and human, will be affected." The intense discussion underscored a growing consensus: the chemical spill might be the tip of